this language is very bridal, isn't it? But it's that the creation is waiting for the revealing of the children of God. The creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. So the children of God are given freedom and glory, implying the creation will be free when we're free. When will we be free? When will we be glorified? How many are free and glorified now? How many have heard of age and the physics of entropy? Things are constantly decaying, right? So it hasn't arrived yet. So what's the creation? What event is the creation for? Waiting for. It's waiting for the revelation of the bride of God. And when does that occur? Upcoming at a theater near you, maybe, right? But the funny thing is that two things here. What's the creation? What's its problem? Why is it all excited? I'm sure it's metaphorical, right? But God is implying something. The creation somehow got the short end of the stick. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, what happened during the course of history with the creation and its relationship to mankind? The creation got damaged. If you read these texts we talked about last week a little bit, it got revealed to us that the creation was damaged. It was damaged goods when we brought death into the world by our sin, and all creation is now under this death sentence and this force of physics we know as entropy, which means everything's winding down, things are cooling off, we're running out of energy. That's entropy. We joked about it last week about your computer generally doesn't create things while you were asleep. It generally destroys things while you were asleep, right? That's entropy. That's the forces of nature brought on by our sin. What? And then, so this verse is revealing that it's as anxiously waiting for us, the ones that are worshiping, to be renewed. So for what? So it can be renewed. In the age to come, there's a new regime. And we'll get into that further on in the book of Revelation. But it's not this regime. Entropy will be, the implication is entropy will be abolished. Sin will be abolished. Decay will be abolished. But creation also will be revived. But it's been damaged. So it's like God is using this metaphorical consciousness in creation to reveal that it also, God's handiwork, the home that he created for us, is also degrading, and it's anxious for the groom. It's waiting, maybe not so patiently, to get fixed. Just like we are waiting, like it says in Romans 11, we're waiting with all the patriarchs as well for the promise of God to be fulfilled. He paid the price, but the promise of that price, life everlasting, the good news, hasn't been fulfilled, has it? What? Well, how many have stopped dying? Has entropy in your body been suspended? No. So we're waiting, and God better fulfill His word, because otherwise, what's the result? We're all dead. So, we've been working through this blood thing, because the bowls, the 7 bowls, which we're going to get in today, they're all full of blood. Why is it blood? Because in the Bible, blood, it does something very, very important. It defiles, but also cleanses. In Numbers 35:33, it says, "So you shall not pollute, defile, profane the land in which you are in, for blood pollutes the land." The context here is sin, murder, all kinds of violence. It pollutes. When you shed blood, when you sin, it pollutes the ground. It pollutes the creation. That's why the creation's moaning and groaning. It's anxious for the bride to arrive, because when she arrives, she's repaired, and so is the creation. For the blood pollutes the land, and no expiation, no payment can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it. There's no payment except the blood of him who sheds it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell. For I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. So when you sin, when you're violent and cause blood or murder is really the idea here. And that blood is shed, it pollutes, it defiles the creation. That's why God shed his blood for us, right? 2 things that it accomplished. 1, it paid our price for our sin, because in the blood, what's in the blood? And the word, thank you, soul, nephesh. So your life essence is in the blood, and in order to pay the price for your life essence, another life essence has to be shed. And that's Yeshua's soul blood. Okay, that was the first purpose of why he was on the. What's the second purpose? What did his blood do? We covered this a little bit last week. The second purpose of his blood was to cleanse. He took on your sin, so your defilement of the land, the creation, is cleansed as well. Everything's good and fine now, right? No, what's not quite right? It's only cleansing for believers, and Yeshua's work only cleansed the payment that was due the creation damage that we did. There's unbelievers. Hopefully they become believers. But in the end, we know there will be people that choose poorly. And their sin has also defiled the land. There's a payment needed. And we've been observing all of these people that are believers that have been martyred in the book of Revelation. And we see them in Revelation chapter 6. And they're beneath the altar and they're crying out to God, when are you going to bring judgment? In other words, what they're really saying is, when are you going to get rid of the impurity? They know how it has to be. There's only one way. How can impurity of the land be dealt with? Well, it's right here in this verse. The only way to cleanse the land is, wrong verse. No expiation can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the one who shed it. So the sinner, the murderer, his blood has to be shed. So we've already seen that. It's a flash forward in chapter 14. Remember, that was the seven angelic proclamation chapter, the fifth of which is the one where we see this angel, which is actually the Messiah, reaping a harvest. But the last one, what do we see? We see another angel that has arrived on the scene, and he's also got a reaper. And he's not taking the wheat or the barley, he's taking the wet harvest, the grapes. And in the Bible, what does the compressing of grapes produce? It produces grape juice, but that is a metaphorical representation of what? Blood, right? Who's at this, which we will expound on probably next week. This is basically a flash forward to Armageddon. Okay, this seventh angelic proclamation. It's a flash forward to this last final confrontation between good and evil. And we see in this verse that this is that famous verse that most people are aware of, where it says, the blood flows to the height, the depth of a horse's bridle. That's probably what? 4 feet deep? That's a lot of blood. It has to be so. Because there's got to be payment for the impurity of the land, so the land also can be pure. Who cares? Why does the creation have to be repurified? It's kind of similar. Remember Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century BC? You know, the Maccabean rebellion. And what did he do? He made impure the temple, right? By slaughtering pigs, and even his presence made it impure. What had to happen before they could reinstitute, after they finally defeated this king, what had to happen before they could start up worship to God again? We celebrated at which, it's not a feast, but which holiday? Hanukkah, right? What did they have to do first? Purify it. Why?
Rededication.
Right. For what purpose? Why would you purify something? What? It was violated, but why purify it? Why purify the creation? What did the Israelites want to happen when they celebrated that Hanukkah, which was actually a 2.5, 3 month re-celebration of the Feast of Sukkot? What did they want? to happen? What's the essence of the Feast of Sukkot? God comes and dwells with man, right? What were they after? They had to clean it, and they knew that they had to clean it and purify it because they wanted God to come and dwell with them again, like he did in the wilderness, right? God we haven't gotten there yet, but let me give you a heads up. At the end of the book here, God comes and dwells with man forever. That's what it says in chapter 21, after the 1,000-year reign. And we'll get into the complexities of that. But why? Because God cannot come to dwell on the earth in his creation until it's made pure again. Right? Which tells you why he can't come at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. Because what happens during that 1,000 years that may be soon to come? Is there death? Has death been destroyed? It has not. Which means what? Entropy does still exist. The result of sin still exists. So finally, death, we'll see it in at the end of chapter 20. We see death and Sheol or hell or Hades. They're all the same word in English. They all mean the same thing. Or what happens to them? They're thrown into the lake of fire and they're burnt up. They're consumed. Death finally meets, not its maker, because God did, but death finally arrives at its end. Right? Then, just it's like God's going like this. Get rid of it. Why? Because it's impure. It's an impure thing full of impureness. And it's the final bastion of impurity that remains at the end of the 1,000-year reign. God's cornered it and moved it. After the great white throne judgment, God has maneuvered all things evil, all things rebellious, which in the Bible are things impure. And finally, after he's got it all corralled, he throws it in the lake of fire. And we'll get into some of that when we get there. So, what we see being played out here in these bowls is the blood of the people that are in Satan's army. They're in the beast's army. Okay? In fact, my take is that the whole world is rebelling against the Creator. And there's probably multiple armies that are arriving at Jerusalem. And we'll get into why Jerusalem? Why not Moscow? New York, that's a great place to vacation. But why Jerusalem? We'll get into some of that later, much later. But they're all arriving and they're confronting them. I think they're battling amongst themselves, right? I think, it talks about the armies of the East, and it talks about the Western. The implication is there's armies coming from every direction. And there's just this giant battle, and we call it the Battle of Armageddon. And there's a lot of bloodletting, and we see this very simplistically described in the last verse of chapter 14. And we'll see it a little more in detail here at the end of the bowls. We get introduced to where it's at. And we won't get to that today, I don't think. Probably next week. But understand, the reason why there's blood in the bowls instead of like Kool-Aid or something is because blood accomplishes a purpose. We're going to see this blood, it's not just poured out of the earth. The first angel pours his blood out of the earth. The second angel pours his blood out of the earth. No, 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 no. Every element of the creation has a cup. And these are drinking cups, by the way, being poured out. And this blood is filled with the armies, the people that are in ultimate rebellion to God and his kingdom. And when you say his kingdom, what does that imply? Oh, a certain way of life, right? Every king wants its subjects to behave in a certain way. And we have the best king in the universe that will soon arrive. And man, we need to be found not wanting like Belshazzar, but we need to be found ready. You know, the bride has the candle in the window, right? She represents light. That's what that whole imagery is trying to reveal. So this is a good time to check in on yourself and see how much light you're distributing. Anyway. On from that. So Deuteronomy 30:19. It says, the land will, I will call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, the blessings and the curses. So choose in order that you may live. How many would like to live? So the burden is on you and me. It says choose. Nobody's choosing for you. You have to choose yourself. So in order to live, choose you and your descendants by loving the Lord your God. So it's telling you how you choose. How do? You do it by loving the Lord your God. Is that like a warm, fuzzy kitten? Is it a feeling? Yeah. But a feeling derived from what? Obedience, behavior, order, service, worship. Without those things, the light doesn't shine so bright, does it? So this judgment that's being poured, it's kind of like God has been giving multiple opportunities, and each opportunity comes with a higher and higher form of judgment as we've marched through this tribulational period revealed in the chapters that we've already covered in this book, right? God continues to bring judgment going, okay, can you hear me now? Because he's tried goodness. America is full of blessing. And other countries as well. And to the degree that you haven't responded to goodness, then God goes, okay, next up, we'll start. How many have had pain brought into their life because of non-conformity to God's wishes? God does bring spankings into our life. And he does that because he's just a mean ogre. No, he does that because he knows where it goes. It leads to death. And he wants to save you. So he brings in a little bit of chastisement to steer you towards him. And steering towards him means you're light. You model more and more likeness with him. You look like him. How many have noticed like successful marriages, each spouse, they start looking like the same. They think the same, which drives them crazy. But have you noticed that? Couples that are really close, they don't need to do a lot of talking, which is good for me because that's not my forte, but drawing close, you start to know the wishes, the likes, the not likes of the other person, right? How many are moving along that pathway? Good. These people that are recipients of these bowls, blood being poured all over them, souls being poured all over them to cleanse the land, they're only getting it because they have not taken the choice to not get it. This is the final chapter of way back at the beginning of Torah, where God says, here's my law. If you do these things, I'll bless you. If you don't do these things, you'll get judged. You won't get blessed. In fact, in the end, death occurs. The result of sin in the Bible is always death. Yeah.
This verse that you were talking about in Deuteronomy is kind of interesting because it kind of implies like a courtroom situation, heavenly speaking.
Yeah.
Because he's saying above that you are going over the Jordan, you shall not live long in the land being also significant of ourselves, and going over the Jordan to enter and possess this promised land, which is what God's promises for us personally as a bride. And then he's saying that he has brought heaven and earth to witness against us today. And it's like kind of what you were speaking about brideship last week. It's like this is the enemy brings cases against us specifically and throws them in God's face. Right. And we talk about these things that happen to us all the time, like sickness and illness, and he's already promised and made a way for that sickness, physical sickness as well as spiritual sickness, to be taken away. But those curses that go all the way through our generations, if we do not deal with them with God in this way, in this capacity, then he's allowed it. He's allowed the enemy to bring those cases against us.
Yeah,
in order for us to walk like that, what you're talking about, yeah, to walk as a bride, we have to possess that land and tear down those giants.
It's interesting that the part of that verse says that you will not last long in the land. I think it's prophetic in the here and now, but also at the end. Why does God say in the land? Because it's his. And if he's going to dwell there, he can't dwell there in the midst of impurity, right? So don't bring your impurity into my land because you force me out, because I can't be near impurity. I'm inclined to think that when Adam and Eve, before they fell, where did God live? In their midst, I think. God has always chosen, it says, where the temple was going to be built, he always would use a phrase, I will, in the place that I choose to dwell, I'll show you where to build this, right? Before it was built. And it's always been the same. It's Mount Zion, again and again throughout the ages. And I think if you look at the Garden of Eden, where was it in relation to God's presence? East of his presence. Since Jerusalem has always been the place of his existence, his home, What's east of that? I think it was the Garden of Eden. What's east of it now? The Dead Sea. I don't think it's the Euphrates. So we see that these people are getting their earned reward by their own choice. And this goes back to the beginning of creation. This statement in all throughout the Torah, but especially it comes to a head in Deuteronomy, which we've been reading, where God is saying there's two choices, everybody, and those two choices did not get abolished. They still are in existence, and that's why judgment is being brought, because it hasn't been abolished. Those principles are powerful if you take them on yourself, and they're also powerful. They work for you. They work against you if you work against them. So, I think bottom line, the reason why these judgments are coming upon these final end time people is they've rejected God's plan. So how do you reject God's plan?
Come up with one of your own.
Leave it to Jerry to hit it right on the head. Yeah, duplicate plans that aren't the same, right? Well, it's a kind of the same God, except there's a whole lot of me in mine. It goes into great lengths, which we'll discover, that these people have taken on the mark of the beast, which basically means to take on the name. To take on the name is the equivalent of what? Take on the likeness, the character qualities. Oh man, you're going to take off the character qualities of the beast? I don't want that written on my tombstone. And then we have learned that these guys are murderers, fornicators, and idol worshipers. How many are those things? Murderers. Murder. Idol worshipers. You can go, well, I've never murdered anybody. Yeah, but is that the limit of murder in the Bible? Is it just killing somebody? No, you can kill somebody by robbing them by lying against them, spreading rumors and gossip that are lies. The concept is, fornicators. When you look up this word, which we'll get to, it's in chapter 17, where we're going to be introduced to this whore. And we'll get more into what she represents. She's said to be for some reason, it's very sexual when we get there. She's very much of a person that is trying to bring sexual impurity into people's lives. And then idol worship. Do you have to have a little figurine on your mantle that represents to be an idol worshiper? What did the ancients think that thing was actually a god? Some of them did, but most time it was an image. It's kind of like a reminiscent of in the false prophet. He creates an image of the beast, right? And it's an image of an idol, an image of a evil concept that wants to rule the earth. That's what this image does in the end. It rules the earth for a short period of time. Yes.
I have a few little figurines, but I have a few figurines, they're like there's some doves and there's some, the old man and an old woman, kind of like a farmer. You know what I'm talking about, ladies? Okay. Are they considered bad
Figurines of what?
decorations?
Well, are you worshiping them?
No. Thank you.
You know, some of us have pictures of our pets. Do we worship them? Sometimes, yes. But, you know, we have fondness of people. Are we worshiping their picture? No. Those are fine. But what the pagans and today, what we specialize in the worship of is self. And that is really, when you dig into this sexual immorality in the whore and what she's doing, it's really worship of self, isn't it?
Yeah. I think this is covered under, especially what you were talking about with the home stuff in the home. It's what is covered under. Where do you give your time? Where do you give your money? Where do you give your heart?
Right.
Where is your mind going to all of the time? And is it what God is asking of you to do? Or your home can be an idol. Your home can totally be an idol. Your decorations can be an idol. If you give all of your time, your money, your attention, your value into those things. Television can be an idol. Your car can be an idol. What people think of you, your spouse can be an idol. Your children can be an idol. If you are loving those things and lifting them up as your identity over what God says, that is idol worship.
Exactly.
Also, John, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So whatever your main thing is what you worship.
Yeah. What's your main thing? Make it God. What are you dependent on? We have a lot of substitutes in our world today. And God's not sitting there going, yeah, you love your wife more than me, or you love your job. He's not going, okay, I'll reject you. He's going, no, will you shift your focus a little bit? Yes, it's important. Those things are important in your life. In fact, I put them there. But they're not number one. Number one has got to be God, so you're attentive to Him, and He'll give you the wisdom to manage all those other relationships in your life. But He's the source, right? Your direction for how you deal with other people and circumstances and your job and everything else in your life is not based on how you feel or how you might or might not be intimidated. That should have no place in your decision-making process. And this is scary because God might tell you to do something that is scary. How many have been told to do something that you don't want to do? Yeah. And for those that didn't have their hand up, you're either lying or you're not listening to God. Because He's always telling us to do stuff we don't want to do. Because He's got the best for us. And we're just not smart enough to see where the future might go. How many have seen things in their life that we perceived as really bad, but 10 years later, it's going, well, I'm glad I went through that. Because I never would have arrived at this point had I not learned of those lessons. So that's why God says, thank Him in everything. So get in the habit. All those car wrecks, bankruptcy, job problems, thank Him for that. Right? The beast generally will lead us into three types of sin, and we've covered them: idolatry, murder, and sexual immorality. Why? Why are those three the most important? If you're familiar with the law, Torah, you'll find that those three earn you what? Death. It's a death sentence. In Israel, if you were found guilty of any of those three, that was a death sentence. When you read, this is kind of intriguing. When you read Acts 15, in fact, let's read it. How much time do I have? Okay, we'll do this. This is the historical recordation of Paul and being confronted out in his ministry or in the Mediterranean region. He's confronted with those that he's selling. The way to be saved is through faith. But he's being confronted with people, oh, yeah, faith's nice, but you have to be obedient to the law. And so there's a fight that rose up. Some men, verse 1, some men came down from Judea and began teaching the brethren, unless you are circumcised according to the customs of Moses, you cannot be saved. Now, this word here, this context, to a Jew, in this context, it meant following the law. It was a broad word that didn't necessarily mean just that one law, but it meant the whole law. And we'll see it later on. We won't have time to get into it, but but notice how the verse ends. Unless you are circumcised according to the customs of Moses, you cannot be saved. That's the issue. They're not fighting over whether the law has been abolished or not. They're fighting over whether conformity to the law brings salvation. Okay? Which this whole chapter has been used to promote that idea that so the law has been abolished because nobody can conform to it. They missed the first verse. The fight is over salvation, not whether it's still applicable. And Paul and Barnabas had a heated argument and debate with them. The brothers determined that Paul and Barnabas and some other of them should go to Jerusalem to the apostles and elders concerning this issue. So what happens? They go, they have a big giant council in Jerusalem with Peter and the rest of the gang, and they make some proclamations. I'm being very brief because I want to get through this. But some of the sect of the Pharisees who had believed stood up saying it is necessary to circumcise them and to direct them to keep the law of Moses. So them is Gentiles here. I'm not reading every verse here. And then and God, who knows the heart, starting in verse 8, testified to them, giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he also did to us. And he made no distinction between us and them, cleansing their hearts by faith too. So we believe that we are saved through the grace of the Lord Yeshua in the same way that they also are. And then jumping down to 19 and 20. Therefore, it is my judgment, this is Peter speaking, that we do not cause trouble for those from among the Gentiles who are turning to God, but that we write to them that they abstain from things contaminated by idols and from sexual immorality and from things strangled. This very metaphorical language. but it's referring to these three things again: sexual immorality, murder, and what's the third one? Idolatry. And what popped into my mind, and I don't know, this is just me thinking out loud, what popped into my mind, is that why James said, I'll show you my faith by what I do? Because Peter here and the council ends up putting a requirement on salvation, that they have to do these three things. Why those three things? Now think about it. Murder, sexual immorality, and idol worship. What is idolatry? It's worship of Satan, right? Bottom line, that's where it goes. It's worship of Satan. So you're putting Satan first. So you can't, if you're going to come into the faith, you can't put Satan first. So that's why Peter's going, okay, you can't do this. And remember, where is he going? Paul's going back to the Gentiles who are polytheists. They got gods for everything. The sea god, the weather god, the tree god, the horse, everything that has been created, they've got a god for it. So he's saying, no, you can't worship them. You have to drop them as gods and worship the creator God, right? Which is the main distinction in the Bible between paganism and which is the environment the seed of Israel grew up in. They were placed in a land with surrounding nations for as far as you can see that were all polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods. And what Peter's saying is stop it already. You can't worship them and me. Murder. What is that? That's really worshiping death. Your solution to problems is not God, trusting, which is worship, and relying on Him, but it's, I'll take this into my own hands. It's following the image of Cain, right? Your resolution is violence, which is the very thing why these bowls are being poured out on. And sexual immorality. What is that? It's really worshiping man, isn't it? Maybe James is making a subtle allusion. I'll show you my faith by what I do. Maybe he's making a little allusion that there's works that have to be done, and that means you have to deny Satan. You have to worship him. If you want to call those works, but that's what faith is all about. It's pivoting from whatever you're worshiping, whether it's the worship of the body, the worship of means of Satan like death, that's your way to resolve problems, or worshiping Satan itself, being an idol worshiper. Maybe God is saying that has to stop in your life. You have to pivot. Those are your works. Maybe. I am not going any further than that, however, okay? What I'm saying is maybe adding that to the definition of faith. Faith is turning away from, it's kind of like sin. You turn away from what you were doing and point your life and your worship and your attention at somebody else. Running out of time. I'll briefly cover this in a sentence. I've got a whole page here, page and a half, but I won't do that to you. If you take a look, we're about ready to jump into the bowls. If you take a look at the bowls, they come right out of Deuteronomy 28. which is where all the curses are. That's just accidental. No, it's exactly what God said. Don't do these things because it brings death and judgment. So what do we find in the bowls? Deuteronomy 28. It's the end of the age. God is bringing his courtroom setting, and the gavel has been hit. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that gavel, do you? Unfortunately, there's going to be a whole group of people that have not made good choices. So I'm going to and we're going to skip all of this. We'll do that next week. Just so we can say that we did one bowl. Let me read this. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God." So the first angel went out and poured his bowl on the earth, and a harmful, painful sore afflicted the people who had the mark of the beast and who worshiped his image. We're going to get into this next week. This is absolutely symptomatic as we proceed of a certain disease that we'll learn about next week. But each one of these is a progression of this disease that ends in, what do you think? Health and welfare, right? No, death, right? And that's what the bowls are simulating. That's the story they're telling. It's interesting that this story was actually embedded in Deuteronomy 28 in the curses. It's being played out in living color here in people's lives at the end of this age. So I want to jump to, got like 15 minutes here. I want to jump to the 6th bowl. The 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up so that the way would be made for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet, cake. No. 3 unclean spirits like frogs. I sure hope it's coconut cake, right? That doesn't sound good, does it? This is all imagery. And it all speaks of devil, the presence of devils. For they are spirits of devils performing signs, which go out to the kings of the entire world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God the Almighty. And then the verse that I want to spend a little time on. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes so that he will not walk about naked and people will not see his shame. What's that doing here? You know, this is very much mindful of the passage in Matthew 24. And it says, therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know which day your God is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at the time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on alert and would have not have allowed his home to be broken into. For this reason, does this mean you can't go to sleep? No. This is talking about spiritual awareness, being cognizant. You know, there's some people have this weird capability. They can walk into a room and sense it spiritually. How many are aware of that? Sometimes it even happens to me. I'll walk in and I go, oh my gosh, this is good. Like today, during the worship time, it was like, man, do you have to stop already? You know, you sense the presence of God. Well, you can also sense the presence of this beast and his cohorts. So, for this reason, you also must be ready. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. People that know are going to be, will sense that something is about to happen. Like right now in our nation. How many are sensing that there's forces that are clashing behind the scenes? It's also, and I believe that this is you're sensing the spirit world. There's a war going on for our nation, but much more importantly, there's a war going on for the world. And it's coming to, when, I don't know, but I think it's there, you know, the first flickers of the light off swords is starting to be seen. We need to hone our sensitivity to the Spirit of God. So this verse is, he's going to come like a thief. So does that mean he's going to come like a thief to you and me? Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were coming. No. You've got all of these parables, which I don't have time to get into. You can find them in Matthew after like 24, chapter 24, 25, 26, 27. You know, the wheat and the tares and the sheep and the goats, and, you know, the parables of the servant that's left in charge of the household. You know, what does it say? He got tired of waiting, thought the boss was not coming back, so he decided to party, in essence, my version. And so he wasn't watchful. He fell asleep, right? And what ended up happening? Falling asleep is the equivalent of worshiping something else, giving your attention to something else. Spiritually. That's what falling, it means to be dead. That's why many times these phrases of dying in the Bible, it'll say, and he was asleep. No, it means to be dead, right? Like Lazarus was asleep. So in some versions, it'll say that. No, the word there is dead. He'd been dead for 4 days by the time Yeshua showed up, right? So I come as a thief. He's talking to unbelievers. To believers, they know full well when he's coming, because they've been watching. They've been expecting. Do you think that the biblical prophecies in the Bible about his return, which it's probably the largest, most voluminous topic taught on in the Bible, is there for fun? You know, I've heard pastors say, I never studied the book of Revelation. It's for somebody else. I'm going, addressed to the churches of Asia. Right? It's addressed to us. But no, we don't need to study that. Why do we need to study it? Because it gives us signs that lead up to his coming. It's kind of like a bride. Does she wake up on the morning of her wedding going, what? Today's the day? I haven't bought my dress yet. No, of course she's been counting down the minutes. Well, let's see, there's 5,400.
Yeah.
Right? So these people haven't been counting nothing. They haven't been counting down. They're completely ignorant. They're caught off guard. They've been worshiping something else. And it's going to require the blood in these bowls, their own blood, to cleanse the earth so God can come and dwell in our midst. Where's my verse? Blessed is the one who keeps awake. Now, of course, it's not talking about literally awake, although there might be moments when God might tell you to stay awake. It's talking about spiritually awake, isn't it? It's interesting, Paul reveals the fact that he's very intimately aware of the rules of the temple. Because he's saying here, let me read the verse. Don't fall asleep. Stay awake and keep his clothes so that he would not walk about naked and the people will not see his shame. What? Well, this is actually recorded several times. This punishment was actually dealt out at night, they would have watchmen on the temple walls and at the gate. And there was a head watchman who would go around the perimeter and make sure all the guards were staying awake. Have you ever had God check and make sure you're staying awake? Hello? That's what this guy would do. And if he caught you nodding off, this has actually been recorded as happening. They'd have to strip down to their undergarments and serve the rest of the night uncovered as a symbol of being attentive to the job God has given you. They were giving guard duty. What job has God given you? If you don't know your job, you better find it. Right? And if you know your job, are you doing it to the best of your ability? It doesn't have to be perfect. But are you attempting to find it? Are you attempting to do it? And it's not like one little, like I'm a plumber. It's a moving target, isn't it? Every day, it's something else. That's your job. That's your goal in life is to fulfill his will. And he does not, how many have been given God's will for your life in a document? Every day, you can look up 2029, January 15th, and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do that. And it doesn't work that way, does it? Why? Because that doesn't require a relationship. That requires an ability to read. What he wants is a relationship. So every day you got to go to him. Okay, what's up today? What do you want me to do? This just happened. How do you want me to deal with this problem? Right? It's a daily, moment by moment walk. That's staying awake. And then this goes even deeper than that. The whole idea of the sacrificial system, starting with the first sacrifice that was made, that lamb back in the garden that God killed to provide covering, a separation between, what it did is it provided a separation between your sin, which was now death and him. So as long as you were willing to shed your will, and it was symbolized by the coming to the temple with something of value. You know, those sheep that they slaughtered, they were the best ones out of their flock. That was their bank account. In those days, those animals represented their wealth. It kind of put a little, wait a minute, before I sin, let me think this through, because I'm running out of sheep. Plus, the priest is getting tired of seeing my face every day. Is God tired of seeing your face every day? The idea is that if we willingly, you know, in Malachi it says, I hate your sacrifices. Is he making a change? Okay, stop sacrificing animals? No. He says he's hating their sacrifices. Why? Because of their heart. They were doing it perfunctory. They were not doing it, they were doing it out of rote obedience. But what God wants is obedience with an expression in your heart of repentance. That's why there was animal sacrifice, because it represented their heart. The act didn't do anything. There's never a place in the Bible where it says animal blood accomplishes anything for you and me. Only somebody that's perfect. And the creation is not perfect. We destroyed it. So, the idea persisted throughout the entire time in the age of man, and will persist during the 1,000-year reign. Animal sacrifices, because we need animal blood? No, because we need some heartfelt expression of action where God can see, oh, okay, you're willing to pay the price as a sign of your repentance. It's still his act, even during the 1,000-year reign, that covers them as well. You know, there's animal sacrifices during the 1,000-year reign. If you look at the temple operations, there's Old Testament prophecies, mostly in the minor prophets, but sometimes major prophets as well, where it's talking about the 1,000-year reign. It's very clear that it's post second coming. And there's sacrifices. I've looked up those words, and there's two different words. There's two classes of words. One class represents non-bloody. They're usually thanksgiving offerings of grain or something of wealth that you just give because you want to thank God for that car wreck, right? And then there's blood sacrifices that are almost always associated with providing covering for you. That blood, that sacrifice of your own will, that heart of repentance provided a covering for Adam and Eve and for them and us as well. So there's no temple now, but we can still sacrifice our own will, and it provides a covering because God sees your heart and he goes, oh, man, I like that. You're trying to do good, and that's providing a covering. This guy, though, he's watching guard at the temple, and it says that he's failing and he's naked. So this is way more than just service at the temple. The implication is he's telling these very end time people that you have discarded the very covering that exposes your nakedness. And in the Bible, what's nakedness represent? Your sin that leads to death. So, John has embedded he's taken a practice at the temple and expounded and presented a message to this end-time group of people that they need to hear. Bottom line, we have to stay awake. We have to be mindful that our awakeness, which is worship, our worship and attentiveness to our Master, provides a covering. In fact, now the language changes in the New Testament after he sheds his blood for us. It's no longer covered. Our sin is not covered. What happens to our sin now? It's removed as far as the east is from the west. And that's a long way. Amen? Let's stand for the Aaronic blessing. Want to do it?
I don't need that. Somebody got a microphone? Thanks, Jerry. Please join with me at the Kenya here on song. Yivorech Adonai v'yishberecha. Ya'er Adonai panav lecha v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav lecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance to you and grant you peace. So may it be his will. Amen. Hey, before we sing the Shabbat Shalom, Stan wanted me to let you know that the snow is melting outside, so it's getting real icy. So be very careful when you go out into the parking lot. Okay? So, Shabbat Shalom.